Hello and welcome to episode 132 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your Tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701. Please welcome my co-hosts from Team Iron Man. It's DuncanIdaho.
Yay!
And siding with Captain America, we have Greendragoon.
Boo.
What you mean is the Iron Sellout.
But I have fun toys.
It's not about toys, it's about philosophy, right? It's a philosophical divide. Or it will be as soon as that film opens, which I'm not actually sure when it opens.
May something, like May 5th or something. It's probably right around the same time as the Mystery event in Stowe.
So maybe we're getting the Stowe Civil War, that's what it is.
Finally, tensions between Kirk fans and Picard fans have finally boiled over. And that's ultimately what the Temporal Cold War is about.
Oh, now I gotta make a meme. I'm gonna go make a meme after the show.
The 30-year fight, 30-year Cold War finally gets hot.
Exactly.
Our usual co-host, Markhawkman, has troubles, but he is with us in the chat room. And I have to first start off with a small apology. I actually said 132 at the last show, forgetting that we usually don't number our live plays when we go do live plays of Foundry missions or regular Stowe content. So this is the actual episode 132. Always still continually amazes me. I've gotten to more than 100 episodes and we're on 132. That's pretty awesome. So anyway, we're back and the Foundry is back.
Suddenly.
Very suddenly last night, Tuesday night.
It crept up on us, pounced, and now we're suddenly having to deal with the fact that we no longer have excuses for not working in the Foundry.
Yes. Well, no longer have that one excuse anyway.
Well, yeah, that one excuse. We just got to be more inventive.
Always come up with others.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are we going to complain about now?
Yeah. and we had all these topics and stuff we were going to do during downtime that we will just, become just regular topics now. So it was actually what you might almost call the shortest downtime in history, shortest turnaround time for a full republish that we've had. It was just 1 week as opposed to the usual 3-ish.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall, and I don't think we've ever had a faster downtime involving like a full republish. Obviously, There's been a couple times where they took the Foundry offline for a couple of days to help with server load or something, but the full republish time, everything went really smoothly. The vision started coming back almost immediately. And then Tuesday evening, I look at the character login screen and realize that the Foundry tab is back.
Yep.
I noticed reviews had started coming back in too.
Content was up and was like, oh, hey, look at that.
Ooh, I actually got to go fix that one thing I need to fix.
Speaking of fixing, Duncan, you found something changed, did you not?
Yeah, on there, I believe it's the exterior map Moon Clearing. It's definitely the Moonscape one. I'm just not quite sure exactly what it's referred to. But one of the things I noticed is that when I was playing it, it's like, wait a minute, this rock didn't used to be here. And I noticed that in a few places. And I think they may have added a few, or at the very least moved a few things around. So fortunately, that didn't break the mission, but it did screw up a few set pieces. So I had to go back and actually make some pretty substantial edits to how a few things were arranged and added a few more pathways. So overall, there could be, in those sorts of modifications to the base map, conceivably, it could have done something bad to the map, especially if I was using something that wasn't as open as it was. So it's definitely something you want to go back and check for all the missions, especially those with exterior maps now, since interior maps probably won't have the same type of issue for the most part because there's just less set pieces about. But for those exterior maps, definitely go back, check, especially if there's like a set pathway and you used existing rocks for parts of the map. Because those may have changed.
Check any interior maps in which you're utilizing the black space around the existing geometry.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we have found that they will reduce that space.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of the downsides to working in a medium that's connected to a live and changing environment like Stowe, is that a dev can change one thing somewhere, and it's like some new map they're working on, and it somehow translates over to some completely different map in the Foundry. And
Yeah, and there's even been some instances of that in Holodeck where it's like all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, the Talaxian base didn't used to be in 2 pieces. And yeah, it's just you change one thing, it's an interconnected system, and you don't know how it's going to cause mutations elsewhere because it's just connected. Yeah. Although it's funny with the Talaxian base translocating because it's like, oh, did they all die? Maybe, hopefully. The Talaxians, I'm not surprised it was their base that did it, but yeah, unfortunately did not affect mission progression.
Another anti-Talaxian. We seem to attract them on this show.
I like Nelex, it's just they're so easy to hate on.
So I see them as something of an underdog in that they're, especially Nelex is someone who is not like, because I mean, the characters in Star Trek are somewhat super. I mean, they're these refined humans that, for the most part, embody some of the ideals that we hope to strive for ourselves. Yeah. And then you've got Nelex, who's kind of lived a normal life up till now and is now forced to try and compete in this with all these super people.
Yeah, he's a
Nelex and the Talaxians are actually almost a bit more like modern day humans.
Exactly, and they're just transposing them in that setting. It's like they're no longer living up to that ideal. They have much more routine problems that you really don't see happen in the show. Just like, I don't know how to do this thing. And yeah, it's an interesting character relief, and that's why I liked Nelex. He just brought Voyager down to a much more immediate level, made it a lot more personal. But then again, you have the annoying factor, so he becomes immediately, you can just start to have fun with the race, the species, and basically make it the butt of jokes. And it just because it complements that so well. You just, with the Talaxian base, you imagine like, hey, what does this button do? Or, oh, I fixed that, no problem.
There was one scene with Nelex that I really liked. It was the beginning of an episode, and he and Janeway were coming back from a trade negotiation, or they were finishing up a trade negotiation or something, and Nelex was negotiating, and Janeway was like totally not and like stumbling over herself because she didn't understand how their customs.
Because they used body language to communicate.
Yeah,
along with spoken language in a very conscious way instead of the more unconscious way that we do. And this is the episode with the macrovirus.
Yeah, and it was just that great scene where he allowed characters to express a side of their personality they wouldn't have to otherwise. Just the entire thing with him and Tuvok was great. Just because you never, like, you saw a little bit of the annoyed Vulcan with Bones, but not to that same degree and not in that same way.
Yeah, I mean, I would almost argue that Tuvok or Timros's performance of Tuvok would not have been as compelling without Nelex there as a foil. Anyway, we've tangented.
Yeah. Yes, we've gone on our first tangent.
Huzzah! One down.
Talking about the Foundry coming back up and changes, and we have actually some documented changes. So there is a map. We got the new Kittimer map, interior map, as well as an undocumented change. We got some new hairstyles,
which also have been added to the holodeck as well. I think it just sort of piggybacked along with those.
Yes, we do get when we get new styles in the character creator by default, we get them Foundry, which is nice.
So I have been poking around, and this is by no means a comprehensive list, but we have been noticing I've noticed a few other things. For instance, did you guys know we had a fur girdle?
What?
Seriously.
Sure I didn't.
What?
It's this girdle that goes around the middle that is like made out of furred animal skin. And there's a they're both. There's actually two pieces. There's a chest piece, which one is the girdle, and then another one that looks kind of like a fur poncho. It's like it's draped over the shoulders.
Is it for all factions as a sort of belt / chest piece?
I did not go through all of them. I saw it on Starfleet, available on Starfleet mails, but it may be available on others.
I would have questioned it if you just saw it on Klingon, but if you saw it on Federation, it's like, well, it's probably available for everyone.
Yeah, and I was looking under the uniform tight, and I saw this. Like I said, I didn't have enough. The Foundry came back so fast, and I've only had a few spare minutes to actually go in and dig in, so I haven't been able to do a full inventory. But we had Hazari and Teray stuff, right?
Yeah, I've been using them since I started.
Okay. Did we have any Nakul stuff? Because we seem to have inherited a couple of Nakul pieces, although not the full set.
We had a few things seep in from before season 11.5. So some of the unfinished assets worked their way in for the chest piece, and we got EV gloves.
Okay.
Tell you what, Dragoon, why don't you go ahead and fire up the Foundry and let's take a look at these things so that we can show people what we're talking about.
Well, hang on, it might take me a second. I have to switch accounts.
Well, in the meantime, let's see. Let's ask the question: how have we been spending our downtime? I mean, granted, it was only a week, but what did you do during your downtime? How about you, Duncan?
I didn't do a whole lot. There was a beta for a new game type in Halo 5, and that was basically it. I didn't have much time to do anything else. So coming up with a new story idea for my AEI mission, that's why I just started. I started prototyping a few characters with bridge officers and characters in the live part of the game, but I didn't get a whole lot of concrete writing or anything else done. I was taking it more of a break. So that way I could actually get down and get started to work without just going through just a very long grind throughout the whole process.
Well, yeah, downtime can definitely provide a good excuse for a break.
Yeah, I killed lots of grunts though. I mean, that's a plus, but it just is not applicable to Star Trek.
So you were showing off a character that you were working on just before the show.
Oh yeah, that's a new miscellaneous background character that's actually using a couple of the hair options that we just talked about. So we've got a alien hobo, if you want to pull that up, or I can pull that. Okay.
Alien hobo, huh?
Yep, there we go.
Some of those Romulan pieces, the Romulan survivor pieces, are really good.
Yeah,
space hobos.
Exactly. Although that one's actually using the scientist jacket because it's like, well, he's a classier form of hobo. So we'll see what he eventually gets used for, but I just started having fun with those. Just the new options, seeing what I could do with them. It's like, oh, that looks good. And it's like, oh, he's a hobo. There we go.
Okay, so I got the Foundry loaded up here.
Dragoon, go for it. Show us some of this new stuff.
Okay, so the big thing that everybody's been talking about is the messy hair. We've got three variations. We've got the messy bangs, and the messy short.
These are all for males, you should say.
Yes.
Yep.
They did not appear to be on females, but they're mostly just really short.
And I checked when I saw these ones. I don't think females got anything with this update.
I didn't see anything.
No. So, well, yeah, they've gotten stuff previously. Males haven't. So I think it's just added ad hoc.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm in the editor as well, and I'm just trying to find.
Okay, so
there's a lot of small costuming.
It's called fur. Okay, so here's the fur poncho, although it's just called fur. It's under chest gear. I guess it seems to be under.
Wow,
that's different.
It's a thing.
Where do you suppose that comes from in game?
I have no idea. So
something on a background character.
Okay, so I'm.
Then to go along with it, or you've also got fur girdle, which kind of goes around their waist. I'm certain we can find some uses for it.
Oh yeah, like it's great
yeah.
primitive stuff, and that's one of the harder things to do in a lot of this.
Mr. Boulevard in the chat room just shouting, "Oh my god, I know what I'm going to use these for."
Yeah. Just as a note that I'm finding here, they're not under Romulan.
Okay. Well, Romulans sometimes get left out. They're a bit of a weird faction.
Bad.
But yeah, I'm seeing them now. Oops. Yeah, I don't think fur works too well in a Starfleet the Benzite.
So this is something I don't know that we didn't have it before.
We totally didn't. I definitely would have seen this because I was playing around with chest options, and yeah, we totally did not have this before.
Okay, so what I'm jumpsuits. I seem to remember we had one like the upper for one of them.
Yeah, we've had those for a little bit.
Yeah, we've had the jumpsuits. I was talking about the for the first stuff.
Yeah, but did we have both the prison one and the Tholian?
Yeah. Yeah. We've had them both. I used them for a couple of characters before downtime.
Okay. I don't dig in this often enough that I know everything by heart.
Yeah.
Okay, and then somebody was saying that we got a new beard option.
Yeah, that was part of the hobo. So it's in very similar style to the messy hair options.
Probably made to go with those.
Yeah.
Here, I'll light the skin so everybody can see it.
So it's beard scraggy.
And cue the Scooby-Doo knockoffs.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why they would have added that.
Oh, okay.
Not complaining. It's a perfectly viable option, I'm sure.
I'll take more options.
Yeah, I mean, it gets away from the clean cut beards. Like, oh yeah, someone could also not be taking care of themselves too.
Be scruffy.
Oh, we are totally going to find somebody trapped in the past now.
Yeah.
So you said that there was some parts of the cool as well.
Yeah, although Duncan says they were there before.
I wouldn't recommend using the chess pieces though, because they have not been finished. They're untextured. So they were totally added unintentionally.
Yeah, they don't seem to have any color variations or anything.
Yeah, and I've got the equivalents on one of my characters on holodeck, and yeah, those totally don't have any texturing at all. They're also a little plastic looking, so just all the material options, it's just not there. But the gloves are, I believe, completed. minimum bar. They have been finished. But yeah, those chest options were. I suspect we might get the actual options at a later date because we did get the Mirror Universe stuff. Although we are still missing the Vaudoir options.
Which is a shame because those are some awesome costumes.
Yeah, especially the face mask. Like I have alien villain faction characters I need this mask for, but I can't, so I've got to improvise. Or at least I need to rip off Guardians of the Galaxy. The Nakul options are not showing up on hands, so I'll take a look. They're somewhere.
Unless they're under some other.
Yeah, it's got to be some other permutation.
They might be in Romulan. They might be in KDF.
I'm thinking that it might be female. Let's take a look. Hands. All right, I'll just keep looking here. I'll find them. The
fun thing about the Foundry is that even if you've been doing it for years, you can still sometimes look through the editor and see things. And you're just like, wait a minute, was that always there?
Yeah, I found him KDF, and let's see.
Oh, wow.
KDF, let's see. I just got to go back to there. And yeah, KDF female. That appears to be the only one it was added on for, which also
Are you
indicates
talking about the EV suit and the cool gloves?
Yeah.
It's on Federation 2, female only.
Pretty
Yeah.
neat looking gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to VOD War too. I think they may have just done a retexturing. And yeah, it'd be great to have all that stuff, but no, we don't. You got to use the power of imagination.
Yes, we do. That's what we're good at.
That's okay. We're a pretty clever group.
Yes. So let's see. Talked about what Duncan did during his downtime. How about you, Dragoon? What did you do?
Like Duncan, mostly I've been taking the opportunity to break out and play some other games. I do have. I did boot up the Triple Foundry and do a little bit of stuff there, and I have been working on a space map. Show you here. For a kind of this destroyed solar system. So, kind of the idea was that supernova went on, so you've got this cracked planet and a busted moon orbiting it. Which it is very hard to work with those broken planet pieces.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, that looks really good. Nice use.
Actually, looks kind of similar to a map that I once built that I haven't ever completed, where I had like a busted up planet like that, where I had arranged the pieces as if they were sort of almost still in place, just broken and missing a lot of them, where you could still see sort of the curvature of the planet where it made sense. And then inside it, I put a transwarp gate.
Way back during the one of the Foundry contests or Foundry challenges, I think it was for the Mir Romulus one. I had this idea of going to the destroyed Romulus and then finding a base inside. And so I'd planned to recreate the destroyed Romulus as best I could in the Foundry, although I was busy enough with other things, as I often am, and never really got around to building it.
For sure.
Now, mostly this is I'm thinking of using this as the final map for Part 3. There isn't too much that is called for on that map, so it's one of those that just find an interesting location for this to happen. And so it's always kind of the
nothing wrong with that.
Challenge is to continually find new and interesting space maps.
So wait, what are those rings set on? Is there a planet in there?
I think a lot of the destroyed planets are in them themselves planets, technically.
Oh, okay. So you can set rings on them.
Yeah, so I think there's a destroyed core inside in the center that I use as the
because I guess there are
some
in like detail, some in planets tab.
Yeah, that's and right. Setting the planet ones is really hard because obviously all you see is that circle. You don't see anything that indicates where the actual piece is, and so it's trial and error. Then they've got these super large fragments that are really hard because their axis is way off from the geometry.
Well, during this latest downtime, I was writing a conversation. Actually, I've got a scene where you have to go and get an officer who is suffering because he lost all the troops under him, and get him back to doing his duty. You got to go to the bar and talk him out of his self-destructive spiral. And so I've got two branches I'm going with. I'm going with the trying to be a friend approach and going with the tough love approach, both of which are kind of fun to write, especially the tough love.
Please tell me you make them do
this is-
push-ups.
Drop and give me 20. I should do that, actually. But this is actually the character that I put up for the Alliance Exploration Initiative crew for Starbase Magellan. Is actually going to be the chief operations officer because he won that vote. He lost all the people under his command during the war and suffers from PTSD, but you need him. And it's you can take either approach, and probably one will make it worse, and one won't.
But you're not going to tell which.
No, I'm not. But obviously, this being the Foundry, you will be successful and he will help out because everything has to be linear. But anyway, that's what I've been working on, some dialogue. And obviously playing the rest of the game because, of course, we got that nice batch of new content that we went through on our previous show.
Indeed.
It's a good time right now. If you got anybody who doesn't have a round set, go ahead and play that mission because you get a free one just for playing it 3 times.
I've noticed that those sets are also really good for leveling characters as they
Yes.
are free to upgrade into,
Free to
what is
upgrade
it,
to
Mark 12?
Yeah.
I'm seeing XR377 log in and out on my in-game ticker. That's awesome. That's a name I haven't seen around the game in quite a while. So
Yeah.
maybe he'll drop by the forums.
Maybe. Hopefully he won't see the fact that we did do Zero did do the live stream of his mission with the funny voices. Which again,
You mean your funny voice?
Well, multiple funny voices. It got a little bit towards the point of egging each other on, but that's just sort of the nature of those types of live streams. But I just want to reiterate again, we played one too many, and it was a good mission, and it was also one of the first ones I played way back in the day from the Foundry. So it's interesting going back to that again.
Speaking of old missions, I was trolling around on Reddit today, and someone had, let's see, what was even that thread? Okay, so they posted a new lore blog today, and in the Reddit thread about that, somebody posted that they, we're all talking about time travel, right? That's what's going on in game. And this guy says is Bardbrain, his Reddit handle. He said one of the things that he played with in a Foundry mission was an idea of a temporal neutral zone, which is a timeline that has largely been unaffected by time travel, which can serve as neutral ground. That, I think, is an interesting concept. This wasn't an author I'm familiar with. He told me the name of his mission, which is Currents Turned Awry, which is something he made a long time ago, and I've looked for it. I don't know if it's still there. But it's definitely a concept that I think is quite cool. What would a timeline look like in Star Trek that has never been affected by time travel? Because I don't think we've ever seen that.
No, and I'm just trying to think of what it would be from like the Federation perspective, and a lot of things wouldn't be around. You would have to have some other justification for why the whale probe, for example, left without killing everyone.
Yeah.
So find that.
Unless it did kill everyone.
Or it did kill everyone.
On Earth. I mean, there's plenty of humans that don't live on Earth.
Yeah,
the Federation in this timeline just would have a substantially smaller human population.
Mm-hmm.
And the headquarters might have to be on Vulcan or something.
Yeah. Or after the whale probe left, they just sort of came back and we'll just clean up.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of the JJ verse.
Yeah.
Earth is destroyed.
Instead of Vulcan.
Earth is just populated by whales again. The remaining species rose up.
Whatever was on that probe, the intelligent cetacean species colonized the Earth.
Yeah, they conquered it.
That would be an interesting Foundry mission, although we can't do the whale probe.
No. Yeah, I'm really disappointed by that. It's just I want just one tube.
Now I'm attempting think of how you could do the whale probe.
It's simple shapes. That's hard to do in space.
Yeah. I don't know. We have things that are circular, like the transwarp conduits.
How many of
Could
them
you
would you need?
line a whole bunch of those up to make a cylinder.
Oh, possibly. I'm also thinking you might also have it oriented vertically too. That might be another way to do it, and that might
Because it does go vertical in the movie, which is quite a cool effect sequence. Where it goes vertical just as the whales are going vertical.
Yeah. So, so that you could do that. That would be a possibility where you find some other object that might. I'm thinking maybe the vault. Just stack a lot of those together. It'd have irregular ends, but it might just be solid enough and round enough that eventually.
But if you put it somewhere where the player isn't going to see either end,
yeah,
you can do that.
It's a big whale probe.
It is a big probe. But I think, one of the most interesting things to explore if you were going to do a concept like this temporal neutral zone is what would the effects be on people that you know? Is Admiral Quinn in charge of of Starfleet in this particular timeline, or is he not? Is he a drunk in a bar somewhere?
He's your Kif. Futurama reference with Zap Brannigan.
I haven't seen enough of that to know.
Yeah,
I've seen plenty of it. I know who Kif is.
Yeah, so it's just following you around and subtly mocking you and questioning your orders and implying through exasperated groans that you're an idiot.
Yeah, Zap Brannigan is kind of the worst version of Kirk. Like all the arrogance ramped up to 11.
He's an absolute great guy.
And then Kif is just kind of the one who's like on the verge of being fed up with it, but not quite enough to actually leave. It just always has that utter defeated expression about him.
Yeah.
Well, my vote would be for Sulu over there to be in charge, and then you have Admiral Quinn just in the background, having gotten passed over for promotion time and time again, just plotting.
One of these days.
Except for that one time when he actually had a command of a ship for like a whole month and then got pulled back.
But anyway, time travel is one of those funny things that we could just talk about for hours and hours and hours, because there's so many different ways it can play out. And I for one, am very curious to see what else Cryptic is going to do with it. I think I can imagine some fun cues and red alerts that could be done with time travel.
Yeah.
Red alert: the Nakul are invading the 22nd century. You need to go back and help out, people from the motion picture era. Fight them off.
The Nakul have stolen the Enterprise B.
There you go. Because everyone's
only find out afterwards it's missing a tractor beam.
Unfortunately, they stole it on Monday. They should have time traveled back to Tuesday. Well, anyway, what we're going to do now is we are going to start a new tutorial series. We're kind of going to aim it to start with at people who have no experience with Foundry. This is going to be their first time getting into it. We're going to show them from the ground up how to access the Foundry and how to get started and all of the various different parts of the Foundry. And then in future installments, we're going to go much more in depth on each of the different things. And these videos are going to be, we're going to do them live on the show here, and then we're going to save them off separately as well, our usual episodes, and have them available for people to easily be linked to and watch. We're going to call it Foundation. Wait, what are we calling it?
Foundational
Exactly?
Foundry.
Foundational Foundry.
Nobody came up with a better suggestion.
No one came up with a better serious suggestion.
Yes. I'm sure
I
we
do-
had many non-serious suggestions.
Well, I did like cooking with coordinates. But
I did too, but
that would just be confusing.
Yes. But this one definitely goes to the heart of the matter as far as titles go, because we're going to teach the absolute foundations of the Foundry for starters, and then keep building on it from there. Obviously, we all love Kirkfat's Back to Basics series, but even that, unfortunately, is getting a bit outdated now because of there's always so many changes to the Foundry over time. Probably a lot more than people think. So, Dragoon, whenever you're ready to take over.
okay. Well, I mean, I'm still going to rely on you to make sure things are getting explained well enough. But let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so welcome to the first episode of Foundational Foundry. This is a series showcasing how to get into the Foundry and like all the different nuances and how-tos of the Foundry. This is kind of geared towards people who have not dealt with the Foundry before but are looking to get into it. I mean, I've heard more than a few times people who have ideas for Foundry missions, but just aren't technical or just don't understand the Foundry. And it's one of those things I kind of feel that anybody can get into it. It's not just, oh, you have to be this incredible game designer, or, oh, you've got to be a technical whiz, because the Foundry is actually really geared towards people who are neither of those things. But
it does a lot of things for you. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to be a modeler. You don't have to know how to make textures in Photoshop.
Yeah.
What it is a mission creator rather than a modding tool like you can see for other games.
And I know a lot of people don't want to get into it because they're afraid, like, oh, I can't build anything as great as so and so, or I can't do anything complex. And I think a lot of it is you don't start complex, you start simple. And if you keep things simple to start, it's actually much easier to get into it and then slowly start to learn the nuances and get more and more complex. I mean, I know authors who used to tell me, oh, I could never build my own custom maps. It's just too complicated for me. And now they're building some very elaborate builds. So this is kind of to encourage everyone to, whether they think they can hit or do it or not, that kind of show them how they can.
So you're starting here on the main character select screen.
Yes. So the first step is actually getting Foundry slots and a Foundry character. So coming from the character select screen, you're going to go over here to create content, which is the tab for the Foundry, and you'll see a new character here. If this is grayed out, it most likely means that your Foundry slots are full. You'll need to buy a new Foundry character slot, or you're not. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and create a character. It's obviously a whole lot simpler than the normal character creation, but you don't need anything complicated. Now, if you're planning
This is simply a character that you use to test play the maps that you make in the Foundry. It will not be able to go into the main game servers, although you can use it to fly around and do things. It will actually be in sort of its own separate instance all the time.
So yeah, basically you'll have a universe all to yourself just for testing missions.
Yes.
So your first choice here is faction. You have your choice between Starfleet or Klingon. All missions fall into either one of these two categories, and that determines which faction will be able to play your mission. There are subtle differences in the way each type of mission is set up. So, in order to test a Starfleet mission or a Federation mission, you have to have a Starfleet test character, and vice versa for Klingons. If you want to build and test a Klingon mission, you need a Klingon test character. It is possible to send a Starfleet test character into a Klingon mission, but their factions won't line up properly, and so it'll lead to some weirdness to the way NPC enemy groups work. So once you decide which type of mission or faction you're going to build missions for, you pick it here. You can pick tactical engineering science. I'm always kind of partial to engineers myself. And then you can pick your species. You'll have access to all of the usual races. Obviously, the Romulan Republic is not represented here, but for the most part, your race does not really have any bearing on your testing.
For actual missions, Romulan characters can play the missions that are with their particular faction that they're allied with. So Starfleet allied Romulans can play Starfleet missions, and KDF allied Romulans can play KDF missions.
Yes.
And I'll just throw one little note in here. There is going to be a difference between testing a mission with any standard character and testing it with a Cation, because Cation has increased jump height. So what I would actually recommend is anyone but Cation. So you're able to determine whether or not you are able to move about your mission for most people. Since even though Cations are relatively popular, they are not the bulk of characters that may be playing your mission.
Well, there's actually a flip side to that, and I've liked to test with Cations because if I am sectioning off a map with like invisible walls, or with trying to keep everyone out, if a Cation can't get out, nobody can.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, in the end, it doesn't make a ton of difference. So
No. And it may be useful to do both. So it's just whatever your sort of priority is, making sure that small spaces are movable, or whether or not you are able to keep players within the playable bounds.
all right, but I mean, at the end of the day, the race doesn't actually matter.
No.
None of these actually matter except for the faction. You can pick your character name. I chose Foundry Guy because then when everybody sees me online, they'll see Foundry Guy and know that I'm in the Foundry.
Is when you're in the Foundry, your friends will see your @handle listed as online.
All right, so
there is no chat in the Foundry editor itself, but you can chat with people while you are testing in that.
all right, so let's go ahead and create content. Ooh. Well, that's good to know.
Uh-oh.
Oh, is it doing that again?
Yeah, it is.
Leave everything default.
All right, so
The nice thing is we can edit this, even though our live viewers will laugh at us.
okay. So, well, I mean, I think it's important to show this because I mean, it's quite likely that other people will also.
On occasion, we do encounter bugs. This one is character creation bug, which has existed in the Foundry for a while, off and on, where the character creation will fail if you don't leave everything default.
Yeah. So okay. So the solution to the character creation. So the solution, if you run into the character creation failed error, is to try again, and this time leave everything completely default. Nope, still not working.
Well, we may need to send this up the ladder and try again another night. Try again. Try a KDF character. See what happens.
I'm actually going to try it too. Okay, yeah, mine worked.
So what did you do?
All right,
I just kept it to the defaults. So I have no idea.
Okay, so I have a theory I might try. Let me try something real quick. Obviously, I'll have to go back and edit this so it's a little more seamless.
Yes.
I'm going to relaunch Stow and make it the first thing that I go into.
Try one of the default non-paid species. Like a Vulcan or an Andorian.
Boolean was what just worked for me, and I set that. Well, I left it as the default, but I didn't get an error off that.
Well, sometimes when you log into a character and then log out and then try to get in, I'm wondering if that isn't part of the problem.
Yeah, sometimes I have that where it's like I've just played my regular character, then I try to go into Foundry, and then all of a sudden it just says Foundry editing not allowed because technically I tried to edit using my main character. That's a little too quick.
So this will be the entertainment value for our live viewers who are, longtime Foundry authors, who don't necessarily need the basic overview. They'll get to see us messing up.
Yay!
Encountering bugs and laugh at us. And then we'll edit all this stuff out for the actual tutorial that we'll post for everybody.
Yeah, that was kind of the sucky part, is that I was unable to, because I can only do this once, I was unable to test it.
Well, the funny part is that I tried to do this a long time ago and tried to record it so that we could do a segment like this. And then, unfortunately, it turned out I was not recording. And as you say, you can only do it once for a new account.
All right, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to table this.
Because you can't make one.
I can't make one. Got to figure out why.
Well, I suggest you get a hold of support.
True.
And see if someone can help you. All right, so we're going to try this again another night. But I guess for the moment, we can do some random discussion topics. I know, Duncan, you're fairly new on the show. Is there anything you've been itching to talk about?
Let's see. Let's see.
How about this? I always say you can tell a lot about a person by their favorite Star Trek episode. So what is your favorite episode of Star Trek from the whole series?
Oh, wow. That is a pretty good question. So only one is jumping out at me, and I know it's not the episode that I would say have on DVD if I could only have one episode sort of enshrined. It's just one I just particularly like. It's Magnificent Ferengi. And it's just the one name that's coming up right now.
Because that is an excellent episode.
It's an excellent episode. It's just there's just a lot of depth to it, a lot of character work, and
it's funny.
It's funny. It's well written. It's a great setup, and it makes good use of the DS9 universe. I mean, they re-invoke Terok Nor, they invoke the Dominion War, they invoke Oh, Ferengi women rights. They invoke the sort of the changes that are occurring in the younger generation. You have the older generation. You have older characters interacting in new ways. And it's just like, here's a bucket of different things we have from DS9. Let's just see what we can do with them. And it just comes together as a great episode. So it doesn't really embody sort of the traditional sort of characteristics people go for Star Trek, but it does embody a lot of those things, the subtle things that make the series overall very watchable and very enjoyable.
It's something I was thinking about the other day is, as you say, it's not something that you typically associate with Star Trek, but Star Trek is one of those things where it's had 700 some odd episodes and 12 movies, soon to be 13, and it's like it's been everything. It's been romance, it's been action, it's been comedy, it's been all of these things. And if you were I saw a thread pop up on Reddit the other day that said if you had to choose one episode of Star Trek to try and introduce someone to the franchise, what would you pick? And my answer would be find out what they like.
Yeah.
What genre do they like? Because I guarantee you there's a Star Trek episode for that.
Even obscure 1950s sci-fi. There's a few episodes in Voyager for that.
Yeah.
I actually thought Voyager had some really funny episodes. I mean, the Captain Proton episodes and the
Message in a Bottle is a great comedy. It's one of those odd couple comedies.
Yeah. And
I liked the Fairhaven episodes too. I know some people didn't like them.
May be the only one. Actually, you're not, because, and that's another funny thing. Whenever anybody brings up any particular episode, you will always find people who like that episode. Certain ones you'll find more people who like it than others, but
well, I mean, I thought the episode Spirits was like absolutely hilarious.
And remember, you're talking to a guy here who actually likes the episode Threshold, the Emmy Award.
I'm not that crazy. Like it's such a strong word.
I like Star Trek.
Oh yeah, I like Star Trek
like that.
The odd thing is
bad. No doubt about it, but I still like it.
It's my favorite. But precisely because it's a bad, but it just feels like a good episode. It's so self-effacing, but it again just has some of those qualities like Magnificent Ferengi that comes off well. You really have to look for it, and you really have to ignore all the other movies in terms of the production values, the plot. But you can find some good stuff there, like hiking in the mountains in the start. I think that was one of the better uses of characters in the movies.
That film has some of the best interactions between the trio, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, of any of the films.
It also has some of the best Scotty.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think, Pax was saying Voyager is TNG light. I think we run into troubles when we try to say, like, Voyager was all bad because there were good episodes too. Or that TNG was all good because there were definitely bad episodes there as well.
Season 1.
Season 1 and 2, I mean, Pulaski, do you know how to say more?
Well, like I said, I mean, there are people out there who like Pulaski. I have run into some of them.
So, I mean, I don't know. It's gross generalization to say that anything is like all bad or all good.
Yeah,
but it is true. I mean, it's true that Voyager was kind of a return to what TNG was.
Yeah.
After you had the very different style of DS9.
If you think about it, Voyager was the ultimate expression of exploration.
Yes.
The thing that everybody lauds.
Which makes it very interesting to see what they're gonna do with this new Star Trek series that's gonna come out in 2017. I mean, which way are they gonna go? Are they gonna go with something that is more like what is on modern TV, which is that heavily serialized arc storylines, which is what Brian Fuller, the showrunner's most recent series was very much like. It was a very ongoing sort of arc style show where you had sort of half season arcs, rather than where it actually started out as almost more of a week to week mystery of the week kind of a thing, but it ended very much as an arc style show.
Well, I think most not modern TV shows do. I mean, I'm just racking my brain trying to think of any like TV show in the last 5 years that isn't doesn't have some kind of seasonal arc.
Well, almost only the procedurals, like Bones or NCIS. They don't tend to do that very much.
Yeah, but I mean, even a lot of those tend to have some kind of arc that'll. I mean, each episode will be more or less self-contained, but they'll bits and pieces will advance the overarching plot until they get to the big finale. And so, I find it really difficult to believe that this new Star Trek show won't do that.
Especially after Enterprise already experimented with that in a few different permutations.
Okay, and even Deep Space Nine did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Well, it's all Star Treks are a product of the time in which they are made. Obviously, the original series is very 60s. The TNG and its spin-offs were very 90s and very late 80s.
I was gonna say for TNG, it's like looking at some of the background characters' hairstyles. It's
very 80s. Yeah, it certainly started out that way.
Wesley Sweater, the ultimate epitome of the times.
Actually, if you want like the example of 80s influenced sci-fi hairstyles, watch the Exo Squad cartoon.
So I'm not going to say that
but
Star Trek isn't usually a product of its time, but I think it's almost always also kind of an anomaly of its time.
Because it does purposely try to set itself in a different era. So it's sort of it bucks the trend in some ways, but then again, it does also have to contend with how people at that time view certain things, like say hairstyles. Yeah. There are certain conventions popular at the time that just sort of seep in unconsciously or otherwise.
Oh, yes.
Because it's trying to do a representation of the future, but it's still affected by the perceptions of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it also deals with the issues that are going on during that time period. I mean, TOS dealt with the Cold War all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes subtly, sometimes very, very, very blatantly and intentionally, like Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, was very much about the fall of the Soviet Union. Even going up all the way to Enterprise, which, season 3 was an attempt to do, kind of an examination of a 9/11 style event in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, and then rushing into enemy territory, looking for the terrorists, and then ultimately having to question whether or not the people you're facing are in fact your enemy.
Yes. So what will the new Star Trek examine? Who knows?
Yeah. Although I do like what Pax brought up. The time period, that's the one compelling thing for me right now, the bit of speculation that it could be between The Undiscovered Country and TNG. It's just that has kind of grabbed me a little bit. Just the idea.
That is very much speculation.
It's very much speculation, but it would be the way
confirmed by a quote trusted source by somebody
on the internet.
Be careful about those.
Yeah, and it's one of those. It's one of those plausible ideas, and it makes enough sense that it's passed on. But as someone who's sort of worked with the Foundry and who has had mad delusions of what would I do with a Star Trek series, that would be one of the, well, besides just working after TNG or Nemesis, it would be my second choice. And it does have a few of those compelling angles. Where like I want that to be true, and that's what makes it a good rumor.
I think that'd be a very interesting era. They call it the Lost Era. For years and years they've called it that. And especially I know there's lots of books set in there.
Yeah, the art style for me would be one of the more gripping things, because it does have just the Excelsior class and the refit Constitution class and a lot of those types of ships. The Ambassador class. Well, if they get that far.
If they get that far. All of those, all the stuff from the movies, the great designs.
Stargazer. Stargazer was that era too.
Oh yeah, Stargazer.
The Stargazer, yeah, the Constellation class. And frankly, some of the best uniforms we've ever had.
Yeah. Yeah, those ones. And yeah,
which are thanks to Nicholas Meyer, of course, who directed Wrath of Khan and is a part of this new series.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard one of the other rumors floating around is that it was going to be like an anthology style, where they have essentially a different storyline and different characters, maybe even different time periods for every season. And there's a few of those shows that have been on recently. American Horror Story is one of them. What is it? True Detective is another one.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of a foreign concept to me. I mean, how does that actually work? I mean,
yeah, I haven't seen any of those examples.
You contract all of your actors for one season.
Yeah.
When that season's over, I assume, scrap all your sets, come up with a new, completely different storyline, and hire some new actors and go from there.
I think it depends on how the first one goes. And I could definitely, the problem is, if that goes well, then it would need to go well specifically because it's a self-contained one-season arc. So it's one of those ideas. It's interesting, but I could easily see myself. It has the problem, I think, where it's going to be difficult to introduce people to the idea that there's this new Star Trek. It's all the series have had that sort of hurdle to get through. And this one in particular has to sort of sell itself as the next Star Trek TV series, with every other series enshrined in one way or the other. So if you do the anthology, you're sort of having to face that every season. And it's going to be a big risk. And I'm not sure at this point if they would take it. It would very much be dependent on how that first season goes. So if they really want to invest heavily in the new stuff, or really treat it as like, we're just going to keep shifting around. We have a lot of ideas. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I can say it's not something that I would do as far as doing an anthology series, because I think for that very reason that you mentioned of wanting to, because it has been 10 years since we've had Star Trek, and I think we need a new crew and a new ship to get invested with over more than one season, hopefully many seasons.
And the Star Trek seasons
and I
also
wouldn't just do one and then abandon it for another.
So could it be that the idea of the anthology is a response to the Star Trek burnout? It's like, we used to have these 7-season-long arcs, and we ended up burning out Star Trek. Could be that this is an attempt to counteract that by keeping the arcs down to one season? And so they can do something new and fresh every season?
Possibly. It depends on, I think, what ideas they have. And are they really going to try to go for one big self-contained plot? In which case, well, yeah, then it might make a lot of sense that you really want to do something else after that. And it could be hard, especially if they want to do significant shifts in the characters throughout that arc, to really sort of reset things and then do something else with those same characters. So, but that has the flip side too, where you can, if you're working with those characters for a long time, you can really get into them. You can really develop them over a long period.
Yeah, I mean, how much did we all love the TNG cast by the time it ended? And we were like, no, don't go away. Give us movies instead.
Yeah, and if you just had season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation to go on, I mean, we would have very different interpretations.
Yeah, we would have forgotten it and had all long since moved on.
Yeah,
unfortunately, we also do have a different. It's a very different television environment these days.
True. I mean, obviously they cannot.
If your season 1 was like TNG season 1, you'd probably have gotten canceled today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they cannot take 2 to 3 seasons to get it going like previous Trek series have.
No, you got to be good right out of the gate these days.
But I think the writers in general have actually gotten a lot better at that too.
And not necessarily perfect, but you got to be really still get more than one season to get even picked up as a pilot. Obviously, I think we don't have to worry about a pilot not getting picked up with this new show. But as I was saying on another podcast recently, I can sort of only say what I would do if I were in charge. Obviously, I'm not in charge, but if I were in charge, I would have some kind of a little bit more traditional, something in the TNG and TOS mode as this 2017 series. If it's successful, if it takes off, if it helps revive the brand, like we all kind of hope it would, then maybe do a spin-off as an anthology series, a separate show.
I like the idea of the spin-offs.
That'd be interesting. I mean,
yeah, as miniseries, standalones, and just in a slightly different format.
And obviously, what that would take is for CBS to be making money.
Yes.
So I had heard an idea online, and an interesting take of the anthology concept is, what if you still did the anthology thing? So it's a different crew, different ship every season, but there is some connecting thread throughout all of them. The second season crew is chasing after something that related back to the first season crew.
Because I actually had an idea for, long time ago, just idle daydream sort of idea of, what would you do if you did a Star Trek series based off of Star Trek Online? Because in Star Trek Online, we can play captains from the different factions. So what if you had first season is about a Federation captain, second season about a KDF captain, third season about a Romulan captain?
Mm-hmm. I may have
with an overarching plotline.
I may have also had a very similar idea. Although that would have actually required moving characters between factions as well. And that was actually the inspiration of a few of the plot points for my SSF series, which is also my answer of what I would do with a new TV show. Yeah, basically that. And specifically for the people who haven't played it, I would take the risk of I would do a Star Trek series without a starship. That would be my approach, and that would
Didn't
be my
DS9 already try that?
Well, even without any fixed assets.
And people thought they were nuts when they started that.
Yeah, and they were, and they gave them the Defiant.
Yeah, they backed out of it.
No, admittedly, the Defiant wasn't exactly the change the format, but
it was a bigger runabout.
Yeah, it's runabouts suck. Here's a better ship.
Yeah, it's like a runabout, except it doesn't explode with every torpedo. But yeah, that'd actually be the way I'd approach it. It'd also get around something that I've sort of been a little bit more bothered by when going back to Star Trek, especially comparing it to, say, Firefly, where you have the character arcs, but then you also have the massive crew. And just personally, it feels like just having the crew, like a large crew surrounding it. There's a lot of potential of bringing in a lot of just any character you need. You can just say they're part of the crew. But it also is sort of liability. Yeah, they could have been in there all along, but at the same time, you also have to find justifications for why 5 people are at the center of every episode. And it gets down to the paradox of, why do we send the captain on every away mission? And that's why I like the idea of a small, detached team. It's about the team. They're sort of doing their thing in a sort of a Firefly type way that they have themselves to rely on. You can involve other characters too, but not necessarily as subordinates in red shirts. So it just for me, that just sort of gives creative flexibility. And you can invoke ships, but at the same time, because it's not the hero ship, you can have things happen to that ship that don't necessarily happen to the hero ship every week, except unless you're dealing with a temporal paradox loop, like you can blow it up. So it does sort of
I'll tell you if there's one thing I wouldn't do in the series, it's have it be about time travel.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
As much fun as we've had talking about time travel.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's one of the especially because it's just what we got through with on Enterprise, and it invokes some pretty big ideas, and we don't necessarily need to go back to them.
So what if you did? I mean, just to chase that thought down the rabbit hole, what if you did have like a time agent type character like Daniels or some other, who like is the constant throughout the seasons, but is like forced into like different eras?
What
like
I'm
every
thinking,
season.
I think the only way that would work for me if it was Captain Archer.
Time traveling Archer.
I think what you're describing to me sounds almost too much like
Quantum Leap.
Yeah, they already did that show. It's called Quantum Leap.
Quantum Leap.
Yes, exactly. That's why I would do it.
What you're describing sounds like Legends of Tomorrow, actually, the DC show that's on now.
Yeah, except that it would be an entire season in here instead of just like 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a possibility.
Everything is similar to something else, right?
Yeah, it's a possibility, and it would certainly allow you to get a lot of use out of certain, iconic moments and settings and characters from the previous series. I think the only problem is it does require a lot of homaging and a lot of references to other stuff. So if I wanted to explore the franchise, that would be the way I would do it. If I wanted to expand the franchise, I would definitely do a within one time period thing, because then you can start building out within one set piece and sort of start creating something there rather than having to worry about delving into a lot of other stuff from other time periods where you have to spend so much time developing everything else. It's going to be hard connecting everything together and making that feel like something original, unless it's something that's a temporal MacGuffin or another.
Now, the other downside with a thing like that, which is it's so self-referential, you're exploring the different parts of the Star Trek mythos, that it's only going to appeal to Star Trek fans.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of why
I think for this new series, because it has been so long since we did the series, and funny enough, the films, the J.J. Abrams films, are very popular with general audiences. Obviously, very divisive among actual Star Trek fans, but very popular with general audiences. My parents love them. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to judge them too harshly.
But,
I mean,
I think that because it's been so long, they need to make something that's going to appeal to general audiences. That's going to get new people into the franchise.
Well, I definitely want the new series
making
to be
something that's some sort of time travel guy going to the various periods of Star Trek past is going to be too self-referential. It's going to be too much.
It has to stand on its own 2 feet.
Look, we're homaging back to this thing that you love. No, I think it needs to be more standalone. That's
almost kind of my one concern with doing something set like at post Star Trek 6 is that it's not distant enough from what we've already seen. I mean, yeah, you kind of call it the lost era, but it's not like we don't have a pretty good sense of the stuff that happened during that time.
Yeah,
some of it anyway.
Yeah, there's some stuff for the Romulans, the Klingons have that shift. So unless you really there's something else, new faction, there's another big event that happened. It's going to be difficult to write that in and make it notable enough that it'll stand up in the season with the series you create. But at the same time, it's not so significant that it becomes questionable why this isn't referenced at any other point in history. And that's some of the stuff that I think came up in Enterprise, where it's just like, all this
for sure.
Yeah. Why did we never hear about this?
Well, I will say that I found Enterprise to be very slow until they started doing the Xindi thing, which was kind of the signal that, okay, we're enough with being amazed at photon torpedoes. We're actually going to do something of our own.
Yeah.
And then they kind of worked in a little bit as like weird time travel-ish sort of stuff that things might possibly change because they weren't supposed to happen this way. And so it kind of opens up the gate of things can fail. Because I mean, that's the big thing is that with a prequel, things can't fail because you know how things are supposed to turn out.
Yes. Now, on the other hand,
how many hands are we up to?
Playing devil's advocate probably against myself at this point. Some of the best stuff on Enterprise outside of season 3 was when they were doing call forwards to TOS and the other series. Like the Augment storyline is a call forward to Khan and that sort of thing. The thing where there's guys doing stuff with the transporter is, all of these call forwards actually produce some pretty good episodes.
That's true. I mean, and it's kind of season 4 is kind of a healthy mix of season 3 and the earlier ones, where you could still get that arc and
a pretty strong arc with like the Vulcans.
yeah, I mean, really develop with them.
I really like seeing the Vulcans be different from what they were, and this is like the story of how they became what they were when we get to TOS.
Yeah, and for a new series, you could definitely do that with the Klingons, because they do have a very different feel during the early seasons of Next Generation. And especially with that, basically the first episode with Klingons is talking about how that society has changed and how it's grown, referencing Cold War developments. But the society was changing at that point in a way that was not appealing to traditional Klingons, and you can definitely go over that, which would also expand the Klingons from sort of how they were later reduced back down to a very, not necessarily one-dimensional, but very much more warrior culture without so much of that progressive social development.
Well, because I mean, at that point, Ron Moore was not in the series, and he was the one who really transitioned them into that sort of samurai style. And so you could go back to sort of closer to the original idea of the Klingons and show sort of the first tentative steps towards peace with the Federation.
Which seemed to take a very long time, considering it stretches from undiscovered country and all the way up to the destruction of the sea.
Which was 22 years before TNG. Or before that TNG episode.
I remember my exact dates about when Undiscovered Country was supposed to fall.
I don't remember either. No, I had my fill of exact dates the other day when I was trying to argue that Star Trek's 2 through 5 did not take place over the course of 3 years, as it is on Memory Alpha, and should only be a couple months.
I think that's some bad assumptions on their part. I think it's only a few months.
I really spend too much time just discussing random things about fictional universes. What can I say? It's a hobby. So one of the things that we were going to talk about during downtime that we didn't actually get to talk about because the downtime was so short was, different people's styles of writing Foundry scripts. I believe Duncan gave Dragoon screenshots of some of his script styles. You want to put those up? I'm curious to see them, because we all write in very different ways.
It's going to be relatively boring.
Well, why don't you lead off and I will...
Yeah, so leading off on
maybe it isn't any different from mine.
It's very straightforward. So there's different ways you can handle the branching structure that a Foundry mission dialogue set can take. And for me, the dialogue I tend to write outside of the editor really tends to be more of the straightforward stuff. So I'm not going to, what'll be shown in a minute here, it's not going to be too creative with how it handles the branching dialogue. It's going to be straightforward, but it at least shows how to sort of structure a conversation, since without the ability to sort of set the character in some other way, you do want to be able to keep the conversation straight. So in this is a bit of dialogue from the Klingon version of my 4th mission. And it does include the indicators for rank, which I use instead of captain, especially when it's miscellaneous other characters. But yeah, it's just labeled going back and forth. And then midway through, there is that option for factions. So player has 2 options there, KDF and Romulan. So then I just start off writing those 2 sections of the conversation sort of side by side up until they really get to the same point, and using different dialogue responses that are appropriate to the faction, and then just keep going after that. So it's in this, you're sort of having the straightforward conversation start at the top. Then once you get the dialogue options for KDF and Romulan, those split, those bifurcate, but then they come back up when I stop referencing those. So that's all that's really going on there. but it's very, I try to go very clean style just so I'm able to focus on the dialogue rather than getting bogged down in too many notations for everything. So I sort of understand what's going on there just in the fact that I'm using these small options for KDF and Romulan without getting too caught up in symbology. You could also color code things as well to make it a little bit more visual for what's going on. So I could have color coded the Romulans some type of readable green, while the KDF is red, if I was really kind of going into a more lengthy tangent between those. But that's how I really sort of approach the dialogue, just by handling in small text blocks. The other thing I could also do is also make some type of indication on what else is going on. So sometimes I'll actually have almost what kind of amount to stage notes in the dialogue, and I could include those, and also moods, since I find that's pretty important when writing dialogue. We have a very limited set of animations, but those can still be really impactful. So that's another note that I would make if something that was really important was there. So military, sad, something like that. Just so I know, yes, this is an important emotion to try to convey.
So you've also got the outline here.
Yeah, and that's what I spend a little bit more time with. So this is a bit of dialogue, but what I'll tend to do when making new missions is to create a general mission outline. And it's handled map by map, and it really kind of takes the major story points. So this is for a defunct version, no longer going to be played in this way. The story's completely changed. But this is for an upcoming mission. So map 3, Donia, I have characters giving brief outlines of what's going on with those guys. And in addition to a little backstory notes, so when I'm writing that dialogue, I sort of know what subtext I can inject and what references I can make that get later played up or immediately dealt with, or just remain part of the background. So at the start, I have the character references, sort of explaining what's going on with a few of those where necessary. And then major mission plot points. So the first thing that happens, you're confronted by this character, and goes through some of the major points I want to hit with the dialogue. Then there's the next set of objectives, the investigation. And there's the two major objectives that occur during that point. Then there's a few notes for optional dialogue, which I didn't get around to finishing completely. And then I would have had some sort of resolution there, but again, I didn't completely finish this off because the story ideas changed. So I would just sort of start off with general notes, and then point by point make notes on what I wanted for objectives, not necessarily focusing on listing them out exactly as they would be, but the general idea of what I want to do. So I can then worry about the details when I actually get into the editor. And then moving on to the next section. So yeah, although the text-based fight scene is still in the mission, I did not change that.
So this is almost kind of the beats of the map.
Yes, exactly.
The plot beats.
Because that's something that can be difficult to keep a proper hold of when you're working in the editor, because it's nitty-gritty details, you're working with objectives, you're just trying to get things to work, especially when it comes to the map itself. This is sort of the top, the sort of the high level, what I want to do with the mission. So I can have that as sort of the guide. So if I'm getting caught up with something, I can sort of try to simplify it. Or if I notice I'm not spending enough time with a very important point that I want to convey, I can try to add a little bit more onto that.
Well, I mean, that's the first time I've ever seen anyone kind of structure an outline that way.
Yeah, and this has really helped me with my recent missions. And the one I didn't do this with, I regretted it later on. And that was Eons. And even though on that one, the plot's supposed to be intentionally confusing, it was a little harder to keep track of than I wanted it to, just because I didn't do this, and the beats didn't necessarily sync up with what I was intending. So it does help at least to structure the overall idea starting out, just so you're working, you have this to at least fall back on. So you have that high-level structure.
Cool. So I kind of wanted to show off what I do. I'll bring it up here. So I've kind of always tried to actually represent the structure of the dialogue trees in my missions. And so I will. So this is the dialogue script for Midas Part 1. I didn't do one for Part 2, mostly because I was in a rush to get it out the door and didn't copy all my dialogue into a word processor, which I still regret to this day because I'm still tracking down typos. But this is Part 1's. So I mean, you can see here that there's the mission start and the opening dialogue, and then the accept and decline. And as you can see here, there's these little half-width boxes. And these are simpler boxes, usually just pop-ups that don't have any sort of branching to them.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get into more complicated dialogue like this, and you'll see it starts out as the row only has one column, and then it splits into all the different options that that person can pick from. And you notice now it's 4 columns, and some of them end right there, so it's like the end of the dialogue, or it links over to another line. Then you've got 3 here, plus the blank one representing the dead end. And you've got the 3 different responses. In some cases, they just loop back to because in this case, I was just setting up like a 3 or 4 option explanatory interaction, so they just link back. But then you can see you've got this one that comes. You have responses, and then you have another dialogue box, and then you have more options. And some of these, like this one, can actually get quite complicated. They got here; it's splitting into 3. You have 3 options.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these actually splits further into 3 of their own options, and you can see it starts to get really narrow.
Yeah.
Here, where so this whole document, this is all the text from Part 1, and it's 44 pages long.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it starts to fall apart if you go above 6 divisions, and I could do things to kind of even these out, like make these columns smaller, and make that last one wider.
No, that's a great way of handling it.
Yeah, so it always kind of has that alternate between buttons and the dialogue boxes themselves. It doesn't take into account who's talking, which is probably a failing on my part. I should probably make more of an effort to indicate who is talking. In my case, I mean, I'm familiar enough with this.
Yeah,
I know, but it probably
don't be ashamed of the length. I mean, my mission that I'm working on right now is at 24 pages.
Yeah, and if I actually did the dialogue like completely in the if I took all the dialogue from most of my missions and put them in a text editor, I would be looking at a similar length, especially with the optional stuff in Gemini and Trident.
Yeah. You'll see kind of in there, in between each of the boxes, I've got text that's not in a box, and those are the objectives. So I kind of place those in there. I will say this.
Right.
I was going to say this kind of broke down a little for Part 2 because especially in the big interior for the alien array, I had these incredibly elaborate interactions with all those key codes and different dialogues that split depending on choices you made. And so I think that was part of the impetus why I never really took the time to copy it over to a Word doc, but still.
Certain things in the Foundry like that, where you're doing a big dialogue tree puzzle, probably don't work so well in other mediums, such as a Word document.
Yeah.
So
but at the moment, I haven't
translated back over.
Yeah, it's got a lot of copying and pasting back and forth. And then usually, one what I'll sometimes do is when I go back for edits, like say for instance I'm going through the mission and proofreading, I will use my Word doc and then highlight anything, like any changes that I make. Okay, so this needs to be fixed. This needs to be changed. So I'll highlight all of the text that changes, and then I can go back to the mission, find where that dialogue is located, and then update it. And so I'll kind of do that to keep the Word doc and the mission in sync.
Let me show you mine. I'm going to send you a link in Skype chat so you can put it up on the stream.
Okay, got it.
So this is my document that I made for my Mirror Romulan mission, which was for the one of the Foundry challenges back in the day. As you can see, I kind of started with like the mission summary. This is what you would put in the mission summary window in the Foundry. So that's what somebody would pull up, and so it doesn't tell the whole story. It's an introduction to the story. And that's what I started with when I was writing it. Because when I wasn't sure where to go at the beginning, it was like, what would be the tease to get you into it? What would be the introduction? And then I started outlining. This is probably one of the most basic outlines I've ever made. Some of mine go 3, 4, 5 levels, but this one was pretty simple. I just kept it almost mostly to one entry per map, and then the different things that happen in it. I don't get as detailed to not every objective is going to be on this particular outline, but the general gist of what you're going to do in each scene sequence is there. And the interesting thing is I have actually changed it. I changed it during the process and actually never went back to fix it, the outline, to reflect the changes. So you can kind of see my process here is that when I make the outline, it's usually the first thing, and that's not always what ends up in the mission. I'm seeing this scene with where you meet Romulan, Klingon, Cardassian, and Terran leaders, because this is all about closing the rifts between universes. I was definitely riffing off Fringe on this particular mission, and that whole sequence is nowhere to be found in the mission. So, but there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not like anyone's gonna have you turn in your outline with your assignment and grade it or anything like that. Although back when I was in college, I often found that I never wanted to create an outline before. So if the mission, if the assignment required an outline, I made one afterwards when I actually knew what everything was, and then I changed it just enough so it looked like I had made iterations. So if you are in college, that's a great way to BS things.
Yeah.
And then if you'll scroll down, go ahead.
I was just going to say, for the style of writing the beats, that's actually how I wrote my papers in grad school, where I was like, okay, I'm not quite sure exactly how I'm going to write this paragraph, but here's the points I want to make. And it would be kind of like talking points almost. So that's what I adapted for the Foundry. And that's why that's probably why I go to that a little bit more than writing out the complete thing. Because the complete thing for me is just sort of the ad hoc. That's what I do at the last minute. Spend most of the time thinking about it and work that out in the outline, and then I do it.
What they call it in the television world, I only know this from watching behind the scenes stuff because I don't work in television, is they call it breaking the story. Whereas you start with your overarching story, what is going to happen in this episode, and then you start breaking it down into individual scenes and figure out what is going to happen in every scene. And then you start breaking it down further to the actual dialogue that people speak, which Dragoon has scrolled down to the script portion. So I just start right at the beginning and just go. And I usually write very linearly from start to finish, which, interestingly enough, is not how I do things in my professional writing. I'm much more scatterbrained in my professional writing than I am in the Foundry. It's just the nature of journalistic writing versus fiction writing. And so what I mainly write is sort of the through line of the dialogue, just from point A to point B. And what's going to get you there. The exact basic line of dialogue that's going to go through the whole mission. And then once I've actually put this over into the Foundry, that is when I start adding branching stuff. And I tend to write that more in the Foundry than on here. There are a few times where I will make sort of notations to myself that I do want branching dialogue here. I'll put something in brackets or something like that. I don't think I did that in any of these.
I know sometimes when I'm plotting out the flow of a mission in the Foundry, I will put in temporary dialogue, which is just a sentence that says whatever we're going to do next. It's like the summary of whatever the conversation will be.
What placeholder text?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I do that.
We need
too.
to go to deflector control. Something silly like that.
You pull it in the actual edition, Captain. We have an urgent need to descend 5 levels and go to deflector control.
Well, there will be an entire conversation about the total process and why you need to go to deflector control, but it'll start out as just a sentence. We need to go to deflector control.
Yeah.
I've done that for optional dialogue where it's just like, there's one backstory point I want to convey, so I'll just write that, and then it's just like, okay, moving on. And I think the worst I've done is in my latest mission. It's just an emotion. It's just like, I want this to be conveyed. I have no idea how I'm going to do that now. I'm going to save it for later.
Elaborate exposition.
Yes. Make a good story happen.
Now, the funny thing about me is I almost never do missions the same way twice. So here's another link for you, Dragoon. I have one of the things that a few weeks ago we were talking about on the show was this sort of slightly goofy idea of making a mission about the terrible fate of what really happened to Memory Alpha. And Sir Boulevard was asking me if I'm still working on this mission, and actually I sort of am. I'm definitely still thinking about it, and I was thinking about it even more the other day when I was playing Diablo 3 for the first time in quite a few months, because I kind of wanted to make it like a Diablo style thing. And with this mission, I have actually started out with almost the thing that we were talking about on Twitter earlier today, which is a lore block. What I made was essentially the written orders from an admiral to your captain. I have no idea if I could put this in mission. Obviously, I have done some tags there. That I just always try and do that whenever I can when I'm writing things out, so I don't have to add it later. But essentially, I've written out this whole sequence of orders, and I don't know if you'd ever put it in the mission itself. You could put a truncated version of it because obviously it is a bit long. I wouldn't necessarily use this as like the introductory dialogue. But that was where I started because that was what was going on in my head. I was imagining this classified set of orders that you get, and your captain sitting in your ready room, getting this on your pad and opening it and reading it and going, oh my God, what is this that I'm getting into?
So I would totally do this as a teaser that you put out on the forums. So you put it in like a forum post in the Foundry mission section, and just set it up as like just this paragraph of these orders, and just then let people figure it out.
It doesn't reveal anything at the moment of what you're going to find when you get there. It's all just set up. It is. And then if you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've done similar things too on a few occasions where I've written out scenes that are sort of just very much in the lore blog style, but also written as sort of more of a narrative format too. but just of character events and setup and just other things connecting various missions of mine together. And even if like maybe 2 people read that, it does at least help me set things up in a way that really kind of helps me go on for writing the rest of it, because it does expand what I'm doing and allows me to sort of think about the characters in more of an ongoing way. So it's, at the very least, it's a good exercise.
And it's fun too because when I did this, I actually did another kind of similar thing. I did a memo for something that I think it might have been Sir Boulevard was doing, or Peace Sutherland. They were looking for sort of lore things like this to put in a mission, I think. And I did it as a follow-up to one of my missions from a long time ago called Sink the Bismarck, which is, I did it as a classified document. It's the findings of a review board into the incident that's in the mission. So it tells about, what the review board found, what consequences might happen, and that sort of thing. And it was really fun to actually write that and write the aftermath. That didn't necessarily need to be in the mission, but was kind of fun to explore. And the other thing that was fun for me is I was like, what would something like this really look like if it was in today's terms? So I looked up, I typed in, classified Navy memos, or probably not classified, but Department of the Navy memos into Google, and came up with images of all kinds of memos from the Department of the Navy. So I let me show it to you here.
So you link me to it?
Google Drive's link in just a moment. I liken this sort of thing to what Thomas Maroney did with the his nifty little, almost like a technical manual, or like pages from a technical manual for the new Odyssey class versions. It's something that I really like doing, and exercising that sort of creativity. And so I made it up to look like a real memo.
Yeah. With a stamp.
Yeah. Obviously, if a real Starfleet was doing this, it wouldn't probably look like this, because they don't probably use this format of paper memos in the future. But I made this one up to look like a real Department of the Navy thing. And I had, the findings of the hearing, and orders and directives that resulted from that. I actually set it at a fake address number on a real road that's in San Francisco, where Starfleet Command will be eventually, in the Presidio. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that you can do. And, even if only a few people ever read them, like you said, still that, maybe you added to the entertainment value for those couple of people, and it was fun for you to make it.
Yeah, and there's some scenes that I've had in those additional, or there's one in particular that I kind of reference a few times, and allows me to do a little bit of follow-up, although mine was actually a little bit more on the farcical side. One of my characters in my third mission, in a bit of optional dialogue, picks up a tribble, and she's serving on a KDF ship. And the consequences of that are what I went into for my little bit of lore blog. And I actually reference those back and introduce the original tribble as a recurring character that's referenced a few times. So at the very least,
recurring tribble.
Yes, its name is Vudon.
So like a Klingon security officer that's running around, always trying to get the tribble and always failing.
It was actually the cloned administrator from the first mission, ends up on a KDF ship for reasons. that are to do with the series, and she's picked up a pet tribble that has a few modifications that allow it to be a little bit more easily tracked down because the lore blog was about the tribbles breaking free. They made their way clear across the deck before they were tracked down. So at the very least, it is just this great writing exercise because it's a scene that I couldn't have had in a Foundry mission, or at least not in that context of just sort of what's happening between, but it allowed me to sort of go into more depth. And the way I approached those characters came up in this kind of very directly, and that sort of the style and what was going on between them. It came up in the next mission, so it helped me set that up. So at the very least, it's just something that's great to experiment with because it's a different format of writing, different medium, different ways of handling the characters, and different ways of building out those scenes. And it's fun.
Definitely, it's fun. You know, I mentioned a discussion we had on Twitter earlier today between the several of us here, and basically it started off because Cryptic posted a new lore blog today, and I sort of almost got to thinking that the amount of story being told by lore blogs at the moment versus the amount that we're actually getting in in-game missions, I feel like there's an imbalance towards the lore blogs. There's too much of that, and not enough in missions.
I started feeling that today with the new lore blog. I haven't been able to keep up with those, and for me, I think I'm personally feeling a little bit of fatigue with that format, and I'm wanting there to be a little bit more in the missions, or at least kind of in the subtext. I'm not quite sure exactly what I want because you can't just put that lore blog content in there. But
no, it's not just something where you can just copy and paste it right in there.
Yeah,
it's what you would need to do is format the missions more so that they don't need the lore blogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, I don't know that these missions necessarily need the lore blogs. It's just that there is just a lot of story content that you're missing out on if you don't read them.
Yeah,
I mean, I've been kind of thinking about this, and I do kind of feel like the more recent missions have been a little bit sterile as far as story is concerned. Like they're hitting beats, but then we're not really feeling any nuance from them.
Yeah. And in just thinking about, there was a thread that was just talking about, on the main forums, what's your favorite mission? And or favorite arc from the SDO series? And I said the Solane series because there was a lot of sort of depth and subtext there that you didn't need the lore blogs to really go into that, because even if they didn't cover all the points, you at least got the feeling that there was a lot more going on. It felt a lot more organic and there was a lot more happening. Even if, compared to the lore blogs, I mean, there kind of wasn't, at least from the character and the faction point of view. Although I'm sure you could have written a lot about miscellaneous Voth soldiers riding home from the front.
Now, I was trying to remember, because obviously the amount of lore blogs that we have today was not something that they haven't always done this much of it. And I was trying to remember back to, say, pre-season 10, how many they did, if they did do some lore blogs with the old series like the 2800, or newer series like the Solane, the Dyson Sphere series. Do you remember if they did lore blogs with those?
I don't remember any of them. None of them stick. Let's see.
Did they start doing them in the Delta Quadrant?
I remember them doing some, obviously, before, the one where Sela escaped from prison.
That was the first one I recall.
Yeah, they did a bunch, starting with they did the whole Tales of War series, which are the Iconians.
Oh yeah.
Let me actually pull up the.
We're doing it run up to the Iconian drawer, and then of course during season 10 and now in season 11 they're doing quite a lot of it.
Let's see how far the Tales of War go back.
But as far as relating this to Foundry missions, we giving you a couple examples of things you could do as lore blogs here. And I would just caution everybody not to do too much of it, and not to have vital story mission stuff and vital story mission plot information in there and not in your mission.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it is a good opportunity to work in some of the behind the scenes lore that just you don't have time for, or it doesn't fit within the mission, which I think is kind of what Cryptic is trying to do.
Yeah, and
'Cause, I
that's
mean,
what I
Oh, I mean, yeah, I'm sure that's what they're trying to do.
yeah, and that's what I've done with all the optional dialogue in my various missions. I'm just thinking back to my most recent one that went heavy on the optional dialogue. Trident. Eons had some, but the major one, well, there's some character stuff, but the only major pieces of setting was explaining what happened to the Alachi in 4.5 million years and establishing that triples are still around. So I didn't do too much of the significant stuff, just a couple of sort of self-indulgent plot points. With Trident, I actually went over some of the social dynamics. So what's going on between species, what are the various outlooks, and the cultural stuff. And some of that does come up with a few of the characters, but you don't get the necessary breadth to make it feel like a big, just a big living world. So I used the optional dialogue there to really sort of flesh out the scenery in sort of a way that's maybe analogous to what you'd see in a BioWare or Bethesda RPG with optional quests. So there's that self-contained mission, but basically for more on this, you can also talk to these people, like investigate these other dealings. And that's the way I would go ahead and use those. And at the same, that does flush things out, not in the same way that the lore blogs do, but they do have the benefit of A, it's optional. B, it's sort of worked into the format already. There are optional dialogue contacts in some of the missions. Even most recently, I think in the in the most recent mission, you could talk to certain delegates, but not others. There's also been a few optional contacts when we've been working in the Temporal lab for the Iconian War. So the mechanics are there. It's just you sort of need to go ahead and write that, but also think about what you're putting there, what you need for the mission, what's interesting, and sort of what justifies being able to sort of dedicate, mission time, potentially, even if the player chooses to do it, but to explore the options. Because whatever you do, you want to make sure that it doesn't feel like, when the player has finished it, it's like, oh, I just wasted some time. It wasn't interesting.
Sure. So Boulevard reminded me of one thing from years and years ago. Is you remember how Kestrel was getting these little Stowe stories published in the Star Trek magazine?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of figured that the lore blogs were actually a response to that because everyone kept complaining.
because
It's like,
everyone was
oh, we have to go buy a magazine to read the
You
story.
have to go buy a magazine to read the story, and few people ended up ever reading them, and including me. I never read them. And one of the things that was in those was all about the Enterprise F and its crew, and that's stuff that was almost never put in game, except maybe a little bit in those anniversary missions.
Yeah,
you notice we didn't get this year.
Yeah.
Or First Contact Day missions.
Yeah.
And then the other consequence of that is that I never really felt any interest or connection in the crew of the Enterprise F, as opposed to the crew of the Lee set, which we had that wonderful Delta Rising mission with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I almost kind of wonder if the Cryptic team isn't... they don't have a lot of stuff on the burners right now, behind the scenes. And so they've been forced to stagger their content. They can only get like so many missions out without compromising what they're working on for future.
Well, yeah, because I wonder if it's the opposite. Is there's too much. There's something big on the horizon that's where all their resources are going, or something.
Yeah, because we don't know yet what their big plans are for the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, we might learn about that soon.
But it could be a case that the lore blogs are an attempt to make up for that. We can't.
Could be.
They can only do.
It's a low cost thing.
Yeah, or at least it only requires a writer. Yeah. It doesn't require a environmental artist and a level designer and a sound designer and a systems designer and all these other steps. Because I mean,
which by the way, the writer is actually on Twitter. Jadua Ross, their new writer. Let's see, the actual @handle is what? Twitter, tell me. Jadua, JADDUAROSS. So obviously, since we're all interested in Star Trek writing here, give him a follow. But I think we're gonna end it here for the evening. Obviously, lots of these discussions are ongoing, and I want to apologize to everyone for not having our original plan, which was to do our new Foundry tutorial. Obviously, when we can figure out how to get Dragoon to be able to successfully create a Foundry test character, we will be actually doing that.
So. And I will be working to try and get that going.
Yes.
And over this time, I'm going to go ahead and copy this over in the stream. I've actually made some significant progress on my first AEI map. That's like what I just posted as the link there is just what I was working on during the live stream. A little bit was sort of the floor was built out, but I've been making buildings.
Well, I can tell you one of the original visions that I had for this podcast when I created it was something for people to listen to while they were in the Foundry. And I guess that includes people who are actually on the show.
Yep. Well,
be on the show and in the Foundry.
Yeah, very productive. I was going to say something else, but I totally forgot about it now.
That'll happen.
Yeah, and just as a note, I think you posted this in the in the Twitch stream, but yeah, the AEI stuff is not going to be starting this week, maybe next week.
I'm going to be out of town this weekend, but I am working on getting all of the sliders for the characters, and then we will have some other material that we will need to write, or finish writing anyway, and then we'll be ready to go. So now that the Foundry is back up, we are back on track.
Cool. And does that other thing include that sort of first tutorial mission?
Well,
no.
That's
okay.
Oh, that. Yeah. Okay. Well, I thought that was something that we could actually work on while the contest was going on.
Okay.
Yeah. The idea being is that we have some sort of introductory mission. What that will entail, we're not sure yet. That is definitely something.
I could definitely suggest Hosra Crazy Scheme in the vein of a Nelex / DS9 subplot. I have no idea what that would be, but yeah, I could start working on something for that.
Well, that would actually make a really good community question. Is what do you guys think we should have happen in the tutorial mission?
The tutorial mission being something that people would ideally play first. You know, if we're marketing this, if we post this on Reddit that we have all this library of missions, we'll say play this one first. It's an introduction to it.
Yeah, so
give you the story. So what should be in that mission.
Kind of like the first episode of DS9.
Yeah.
It's basically
it's a pilot episode.
Yeah.
The things that need to happen are players get invited to the exploration initiative, see the station for the first time, interact with the station crew characters, but obviously we also want to have something fun and entertaining to happen along the way. So, give us your suggestions about what could possibly happen there.
Right. Well, Dragoon, if you want to put up our contact info.
All right. We are available by email at foundryroundtable@live.com, which is actually a great place to send us your suggestions, because Twitter tends to be kind of limited to 140 characters. But if you really want to, you can also contact us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtable. We'll just get mad at you if you send us a very long list of tweets, all trying to explain your plot idea.
It's in these 5 different conversations.
If you really need to do that, send that to Drogyn at Drogyn1701. If he can't get a hold of him, DuncanIdaho is at Gorgonoffs_SSF. Mark rarely checks his Twitter, so I don't know that sending him to at Markhawkman will help. And I definitely do not recommend sending it to at Greendragoon.
And whatever you do, always tag Rogue Enterprise.
Yes. Especially if you expect it to become a very long Twitter chain.
Or anybody else who would be annoyed by long Twitter chains on their phone. So. I do not check Twitter on my phone, so I am perfectly happy with long chains of conversations.
Well, they say every time Rogue Enterprise's phone dings, a Klingon gets his batleth.
Well, that'll do it for us tonight, gentlemen. So say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.